So could you please welcome Nassim, and he'll take us up to our morning tea.
Okay, hi everyone. So I wanted to, and thanks for that welcome, Laurel, it's very kind. I wanted to start with a couple of disclaimers. So number one, I'm wearing my bulletproof vest. So thank you. So any angst or about class, gripes about class, feel free to point and shoot. I'm ready to go. Disclaimer number two is, I guess I'm presenting a very loose kind of session, but in this session I'm presenting my own views. Like, it's not the view of Central Coast CLC or the National Association or CLC New South Wales. This is just me drawing on my experience of being working in a community legal centre for about 10 years. And the disclaimer number two, this is like a bit of a reworking of a session that's normally presented at the practice management course with new people who are becoming principal solicitors. So I'm just not sure how it's going to work out in this format with 90 people all facing me as opposed to 20 people sitting in a circle. So we'll just see how it goes. What I really want to talk about today, or the ideas that I want to go through today, is about what makes being a community lawyer different. Okay, so how is being a community lawyer different to being in private practice or working in government? And look, because I know quite a lot of people in the room and I know the experience in the room, I'm by no means trying to say I'm an expert and what I think is really important. But what I do think is important, and what I'd like you to, I guess the main thing I'd like you to take away from this session is that questioning our role and questioning how we do that is actually really important and something that we should be asking ourselves all the time. So if that's my core message, I'll try and keep coming back to that. I'm going to hopefully say some controversial things and try and kind of stir things up. But my intention isn't to say that you need to listen to what I say. The intention is more that there's this constant kind of dialogue that we're having with ourselves and with the sector about how do we do community law. Okay? So it might be helpful to me, just because there's also people in the room who I don't know, like, who's been working in CLCs for more than 20 years? Put your hands up. Who's been working more than 15 years, 15 to 20 years? Put your hands up. Okay, more than 10 years? 5 to 10 years? 4 years? 3? 2? 1? Okay, so like, interestingly, I don't know if everyone saw their hands, but most people have been in the sector for 10 years or around that kind of time plus. Like, that's pretty impressive. So I want to draw on that expertise or that experience in the room in terms of what we talk about in this session. So look, I guess question number one, or topic number one, for most of us, we're working in an NGO. So how does that make things different? Okay, so that's a question for you. If I can just get you to have a 5-minute chat in your group, how does working in an NGO make being a lawyer different? All right, so do you know what your legal structure is? Do you know what the legal structure of your NGO is? All right. If I could get every back, So you can blame the group at the front, but they've already finished talking, so I figure you've all had enough time. Excuse me, could I get your attention, please? Fire. Okay. All right, so can we just kind of go around? I'm going to repeat what people say just so you know, because this session's being recorded and just so the sound picks it up. It's not that I want to parrot you, but can we just go around? What makes working in an NGO different?
We are led by our community groups. We're not led by some unknown bureaucracy up the top making decisions on a large scale.
Okay. Somewhere and over here.
We found that with the community legal centres, it actually means that we're very much fed on the ground. We're right at the coalface because we're dealing face-to-face with clients. We're a lot closer to dealing with the law than, say, for example, corporate-type law firms. So I'd say our area is a lot more complicated with a lot more responsibility. It can't be fobbed off because somebody else is actually overseeing and sort of dealing things. We're just sort of just doing all fingers on the keyboard.
Yeah. Someone from over there, something different?
The not-for-profit aspect. It makes things very different.
Thanks. Sorry, I forgot to parrot people. So the front group it's kind of community-led, community-driven. The other comment was at the coalface, kind of like with your clients doing more day-to-day kind of real law as opposed to more esoteric corporate stuff, working in a not-for-profit. Do you want to just elaborate on what you kind of mean by that?
Well, it means there's not a lot of resources to start with. You're constantly having to be concerned about the funding, but it also means that there's not a drive for success for the organisation in money terms. I think it allows you to be more client focused.
Okay. All right, so it's being in a resource-limited environment, kind of reliant on funding and not driven by making money. Someone towards the back?
I think you're not driven by how much the client, well, obviously not driven by how much the client can pay in terms of the work you do for them. So once you decide to take on a matter, then you do the work that's required as opposed to what they can pay for.
Okay, so you're driven more by the scope of work than the client's ability to pay. Someone at the... Oh, yep, sure.
Yeah, often we do broader work as well. So we do law reform, we look at systemic advocacy, education and training, and community engagement. So sometimes also our matters fall within some of that stuff, and that can also have interesting tensions and challenges between some of the other kinds of works that we do, which I don't think typically government departments or private sector would be interested or engaged in.
Yep, so because we do law reform and other types of not necessarily direct client work, that can make for interesting tensions, sometimes ethical dilemmas, and yeah, just in the way that we balance our work. Someone at the back on this side? Okay, all right, we'll move forward, yeah.
Who is your client? Who is your client? You work for the government, or the government's your client.
Yeah.
Not a non-government organisation, people who come through the door on the telephone.
Yeah.
Potentially.
So I guess our client base is different and unique and is usually community members. Yep, sorry, just...
I heard somebody say this at an ethics lecture a long time ago, that because of the nature of our clients' financial, economic situation, they're probably really unlikely to ever sue us.
Okay.
That's not a reason to have like...
Yeah. We'll get to you. All right, so... But I think what you're saying, we could...
It's to be mindful of like maintaining our own ethical practices and be really, conscious of that obligation regardless of that outcome.
Yeah.
So that's not a dynamic that I think would exist in another workplace.
All right, so maybe to say it in a slightly different way, many of our clients have limited capabilities or are more vulnerable than most, and so the way we have to have a higher ethical basis, or we need to look out for them more than another type of lawyer might look out for their client.
Just because there's not the threat that you're going to be sued for breach of confidentiality, that's not a reason not to be even more mindful of their vulnerabilities.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel?
Following on from the law reform thing, we have less constraints in terms of being able to critique government. And obviously there's some issues around funding agreements, but we're not part of bureaucracy, so we actually have a strong voice in saying things aren't right.
Okay. So great point. So because we're not part of bureaucracy or we're not tied to, making a profit, we're a bit more independent and we can a bit more speak our mind about the issues affecting our clients and the kind of social change we're trying to push for. Someone in... Yeah, sorry, yeah?
We practice law holistically, so we address both the non-legal and legal needs, where in private practice you might just be more constrained to only addressing the legal needs.
Yep. So we practice law in a more holistic way, addressing legal and non-legal needs. Someone in this middle group here? I'll come to you in a sec. Yeah.
We're often pursuing a broader objective than just any individual client objective, and as someone else said, that creates certain tensions. But I think a really big thing is because we don't choose our clients on the basis of whether they can pay us or not, we have to choose on other bases, and that can be both a wonderful thing and a terrible thing.
Yeah. All right, so to just summarise that, because we're an NGO or a not-for-profit, we have a broader social objective that isn't just making money or helping an individual client, and so that sometimes can create tensions or interesting challenges for us about which client we're going to help in which situation. Yep.
I think for all of those reasons, we have contact with a whole lot of people through our organisations who are like-minded and therefore will help us and return phone calls.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, look, I think that's a good point. So because you're a not-for-profit, that gives you a kind of leverage in a way that a for-profit doesn't have. So people see the social good, or they're attracted to your organisational goal, so they want to kind of work and collaborate with you in a way that I don't know, I haven't worked in the private sector, but I assume private sector collaborations are more about making money. Mel?
Just the fact that you've got a board of management, that sometimes you have to bring them along with you in a way that you wouldn't have to in private practice. You can be quite autonomous with the decisions you make, but this way you've got that structure behind you.
Yeah, so absolutely. So because you're community-based, you have to bring the community along with you. Your decision-making is, I guess, generally more democratic, more collaborative, and you're working in a general sense more cooperatively, even from the top down. Alexis, did you want to say something? Or?
One thing I think about is that our clients don't always have the best interaction with the justice system, and it's not been positive in the past, and we're in a real position to make that a positive interaction as best we can be. Okay,
so yeah, we can change. Well, hopefully we can be part of changing the way our clients view the justice system, and sometimes show them that there is actually justice for them. Yeah. So look, so I just want to pull all of that together. So I think there's what I would call the boring part of being in an NGO. It's you're a company limited by guarantee, or you're a cooperative, or you're an incorporated association, you're reporting to Fair Trading or ASIC, you're reporting to ACNC. So there's a bureaucracy in a way, even though we're independent community organisations, we're still just in our day-to-day function, we're having to deal with bureaucracy. Often we're getting government money, so we're doing, we're acquitting funding applications and all of that kind of stuff. In the not-for-profit sector we happen to be in, we've voluntarily accepted accreditation and all the bureaucracy that kind of comes with that, but there's, certain standards, we set ourselves that we need to meet. And then on what I would say the more exciting side is that we're there, we're able to respond to the community, we're nimble, we're small enough, we can make personal, individualised decisions that meet the needs of a particular client. You know, we're not, although we have policies and procedures, we're not, let's say, like legal aid that has a more one-size-fits-all, you know, whether you're in Dubbo, whether you're in Broken Hill, whether you're in Sydney, it's the same kind of legal services. Whereas we can adapt to our local community or in the areas of law we practice to kind of actually meet the needs of clients and our community. All right, so look, talking about money and considering that there's a funding cliff coming in 3 months' time, and I'm sure like some centres are more affected by others by funding cuts. I'm looking at you in particular, Alexis. Like some centres are losing $700,000 plus, some centres are losing $5,000. And even the centres that aren't losing anything, you're still losing because there's no real CPI increase on the amount of money you're getting. Like the funding that we're getting is not keeping up with wages. So really there's this kind of invisible shrink on our funding that we're not always actively talking about. So kind of keeping all of that in mind, who's the most important person in your CLC? Like who's in terms of staffing, if we're turning our minds to cutting positions, who is essential to your community legal centre? 5-minute discussion. Have I just completely depressed you? All right, if I can bring you back. George Brandis is coming in a moment. But he needs you to be very, very quiet before he comes in. Okay, if I could just bring everybody back, please. So, look, let's start at the back on this side. What were the thoughts? Who are the most important staff in a CLC? Okay, okay, good answer. The team. Not much point in managing a legal service if. Okay, yep. So if you've only got a principal solicitor by themselves, it's hard to be a community legal centre. Someone in this middle group. Yep.
Volunteer manager. I've been hearing from CLCs this is a big need for people. There's a lot of people who want to volunteer who have got practicing certificates who can be giving legal advice. To be able to capitalise on that, those available resources better.
Okay, I think that's a really great thought. That what you need most of all is someone who can leverage all the free kind of resources that are out there, and a volunteer manager is absolutely part of that mix. Someone from the front want to have a go? Karen or Natalie, as people have been in the sector for 20 years plus, do you have any, because you've seen us go from social workers and volunteer managers to be kind of professionalised, do you have any thoughts about...
So it's impossible to say that one role is more important.
Yeah. All right, good evasion. Sorry, hand up over there.
We were thinking that the most important people are the people who engage in the community with the servicing. So often that's going to be the solicitor, but that can be other people as well. So just to keep that relationship going.
Yeah. So the community engagement aspect is probably the most important aspect of the work that we do. Someone from this group, yeah? No, you put your hand up, you go first.
The coordinator who's in charge of funding, of applying for funding, receiving funding. Without the funding, there's no CLC, no lawyers to employ, no staff to run.
Okay, so the person that manages the funding or brings the money in?
Well, the person with the greatest skills, yeah. And I think it's a certain set of skills.
Yeah.
Whoever that person is, who's dynamic and creative to look for alternative sources of funding to maintain the centre or to help grow the centre.
Yep. Someone from that kind of group?
Look, I would just say that I don't think there is any one person that's open. We're just saying that administrative staff support frontline services. Without administrative staff, you can't do your work, because if you're a solicitor, you'd be managing your casework and also administrative functions, and that would be taking it away from...
Yeah. Yeah, all right. No, but fair enough. I mean, we've all got different experiences and we should, respect each other's experiences. But absolutely, admin staff definitely facilitate the rest of the team being able to do more work. Someone towards the back on that side? Okay, so look, you know, in a sense where this question comes from, I was at the last practice management course, so I think Alia was there. Some of you might be in the room, so sorry. But I don't know, I just went on this, I went a bit crazy and just fired up and started going, you know, lawyers are the least important person in the community legal centre. And I say that being a lawyer, having been a principal solicitor for 8 years, but sometimes I think, and I'm not saying, you know, it's not personal, but sometimes I think we have an overblown sense of not only our importance, but the importance of the PII. And I know that that's some kind of sacrilege to say, but like absolutely risk management is important. Upholding our ethics is important. But what I want to put out there is actually what's more important is what Karen said earlier, is what is the purpose of our organisation? And we've all got different purposes. You know, there's probably 40 organisations in the room. But generally, I would say what we have in common is we want to provide access to justice for people who otherwise wouldn't have it. And I think that sometimes we let the lawyering get in the way of that. Like, providing legal services absolutely is what is important. But I think that there is something really important about how we do that. So, you know, I know that there are centres out there, for example, around conflict checking. If a name appears in Celsius, there's a conflict, no service is provided. Rather than going through a more nuanced, you know, let's balance what information do we know about that person, is there actually a conflict, etc., etc. And like what I like to say is, look, what motivated me to become a new community lawyer is that I started off as a more community activist, right? So for me, it's more important about creating social change. We live in a very unfair, unequal society, and one of the ways that I could do that was by being a lawyer and you know, providing access to justice. Now, I'm not saying that my motivation needs to be your motivation, but I want you to think about, why are you working in a community legal centre? Is it to be a lawyer that just follows the rules? Or is it about being someone that actually facilitates justice? Okay, and so where are you going to draw the line about how you do that? Now, we'll all draw the line differently, and that's totally fine. But it's more about interrogating ourselves. Is it more important that I follow the risk management guide in a blinkered black and white way? Or is it more important that I push my ethics to the limit to be able to provide access to justice to someone who would never be able to get it somewhere else?
Oh, you should have been here this morning.
Yeah. Now, like, it's interesting because you call the Law Society, you speak to the ethics people there. Do they ever help you? Like, do they ever give you an answer? Now, like, don't get me wrong, I call them and I speak to them because it's a sounding board and I bounce off them and they help me then come to my own point of view, but they never give you an answer. They'll say Rule 5 says blah, 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 and Rule 7 says blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, I could have read the rules without calling you, thank you. But, you know, thank you for telling me what the rules are. Now, look, I'm talking with some attitude and whatever, but what I'm wanting us to do is get fired up and get excited about how we do our work, okay? Because I think in some ways we've lost our way. I want to put out there that we've lost our way. In becoming professionalised, we've allowed ourselves to become too constrained in how we do the work. And now is the time when our funding is under threat, when we're reliant on the government dollar, that we actually cut those kind of ties, cut those restrictions, and go back to why we are doing this work. Okay? Now, like I said, you don't have to agree, you know, I don't want you to blindly agree with what I'm saying, but I want you to question yourself about how you do your work. And where are you going to draw the line in terms of doing your work? And look, this comes, when I was thinking about talking about this, I was thinking about an example when I was at Marrickville Legal Centre. So I was at Marrickville Legal Centre. We had a client who'd been with us for about 2 years, a victims compensation client, and sexual assault, and it had, like, the lawyer, it wasn't my case, but the staff solicitor who had been working with her had taken her a year just to develop the trust relationship to be able to get the information to do the victims comp application. And then, 2 years into it, lovely volunteer, doesn't spell a name correctly, and we end up advising her perpetrator about I think it was a drink driving or something, some criminal matter. So, we've got a conflict. What do I do? Do I now turn around and say to her, oh, sorry, we can't help you anymore? So I call the Law Society, and that's basically what they tell me to do. But I just make the decision, look, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to manage this risk within an inch of its life, and I'm going to push myself, and if my practicing certificate's on the line, then so be it. And I'm not trying to say that as being a hero or I want some commendation for that. I'm trying to say, I'm hoping that you're here because you're an activist and you're willing to put your privilege on the line to help people. Okay? That you're willing to put all the schooling and education and the power that being a lawyer has on the line to open the door or keep the door open for someone who's got nowhere else to go. Anyway, so I'll get off the high horse. So we touched on earlier, so totally changing gears now, we touched on earlier about how working as... I tried to focus on being an NGO and there was a bit of slippage about how we do law. So what I mean by that is, we do law, it's collaborative, it's holistic, it's, we're focusing on legal and non-legal needs. So I just, again, how should we be doing law? And how much does your centre do law that way? So another break into groups, and maybe talk to a different person this time. How should a community lawyer do law? And does your CLC do it that way? okay? Alright, if I could just bring everybody back, please. $1,000 for the last person to stop talking. Actually, that doesn't work because it encourages you to keep talking. All right. So look, we've just got 15 minutes left, and I do want to do the round and then wrap up. So I might just let me pick on in the middle here, maybe to start off with. Yeah, how is being a community lawyer? Like, what are elements of being a community lawyer? Or one element? Or what did you just, whatever feedback you want to give from your discussion.
I think we've been off topic.
Okay. What did you talk about?
Many things.
Okay, all right.
No, I think being brave. I think, because there's so many lawyers in community legal centres, and it didn't used to be that way, that it's tipped us into that kind of conservative thing. And in all the funding cuts, everybody's always thinking about, if we speak out on this, are we going to lose our funding? And it sort of keeps us in our box, if you like. And so we need to remember to be brave. And I was also giving the example of one of our solicitors, who's not our solicitor anymore, has actually burnt her practicing certificate in her backyard and decided that she'd rather be an activist than a lawyer in CLCs because she can do a better job. And I think that says everything.
Wow. So being brave, burning your practicing. Someone in this group over here.
I think we can be agent of change in terms of, we look after a client in, for instance, family law matter, follow the family law legislation, at the same time use the case studies for law reform submissions. When I was in private practice, which other clients, that's the law, can't do anything about it. In CLC law, the law we weren't happy with, the best interest principle, everyone put submissions in, it changed. Something that more so is available through CLC centres than through private practice. That's
So
why
yeah,
I see the distinction. We can actually be an agent of change, conjure it to change the law that it doesn't work. Use our clients' case studies as instances where it's failed, and lobby.
So being an agent of change and using our advice and casework experience to generate case studies that create change in the law.
Where the law has failed.
Yeah, where the law has failed. Right at the back over there. Someone? Anyone? Yep.
I kind of like what you said before, Nassim, about the lawyers not being the most important people in the room. Yeah. And I kind of prefer the dynamic where lawyers are actually outnumbered by other people, because for me the experience of seeing how other disciplines think about the client and the benefit that actually flows to a client from that process, and also as lawyers, to think, in that holistic way, I actually prefer that dynamic. So I think we can think differently as a sector about not continuing to push potentially for funding just for lawyers, but because we're saying our services are multifaceted and their clients' needs are complex. Maybe we need to think about a way of petitioning the Department of Health or community services for funding for social workers and counsellors and engagement staff, because that will actually enhance the way in which we work and probably outcomes to our clients too.
Okay, so just to summarise for the recording, lawyers aren't necessarily the most important people in the room, and there's something to learn from an interdisciplinary approach that actually makes our organisations better suited to the needs of our clients. Look, just on that, and kind of why I put the question before about who is the most important person in your CLC, like when I was chairperson of CLC New South Wales, things that would filter up sometimes is, let's say, around the Aboriginal access work, that Aboriginal access workers felt very vulnerable, and that because they were often the last on, they'd be the first off in any kind of budget cut, or because the lawyers are more important, it's the non-lawyers that would lose their jobs. But I think some of what we're touching on is actually maybe the Aboriginal access worker is, if your target community is Aboriginal people, perhaps the Aboriginal access worker is actually the most important person in the office. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case. It's going to be different for your community, for what you see your social purpose is. But my understanding too is that the first community legal centres had no lawyers. You know, the people that were doing the work were facilitators, coordinators, social workers, and they were using volunteer lawyers to deliver the legal services. So I'm not saying we should go back to 40 years and do things how we did 40 years ago, but let's learn from our history and keep that part of our history alive, in a sense, in how we do work now. Yeah.
A colleague many years ago when I first started in CLC told me, and when we go to the outreach towns, see yourself as a hired help, not as a solicitor. You're the hired help, you're there at that service, the admin, Aboriginal staff run it, we're the hired help.
Yeah.
And having that attitude and keep thinking of that was really important.
Okay, yep, hand.
At the Seniors' Rights Service, our client's the older person, but we often get calls from the children, and we're able to help them with information and guidance as to applications they can lodge. So that's like a community bent to the service that we're giving.
Yeah. All right, so just to repeat that for the recording, so like at Seniors' Rights, it's primarily for older people, but sometimes the children of older people call and there is still a service applied because ultimately it assists an older person, and it's part of also the community kind of education function of Seniors' Rights. Did anyone at the back over there want to say something? Yep.
I think just to reiterate that earlier comment about being brave, it's about applying, working within our rules and thinking well about our ethical obligations, but also not thinking about our purpose and trying to make those things work together.
Okay, yeah. So look, yeah, I often find that like in the kind of work that we do, it's always balancing a bunch of tensions, and you're kind of raising that. It's about what's our purpose, what are our professional obligations, what other obligations we might have, and how do we balance all of that? How do we navigate the way through that we're kind of referencing all that, but while still doing what we're here to do? Anyone else want to say anything? Yeah.
The tension we talked about was, in some ways we have a lot of autonomy and we can give our clients the luxury of the time they need, as you were describing with your case, the time and attention they deserve and they need. The balance against that is that the more time you give to one client, there are other needy clients that you're not able to help, and I think that's a very constant tension for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I think it was mentioned, also in the first group, but a key challenge for us in limited resources, how do we divide those resources between everyone that needs it? And I think that's it's an ongoing conversation and an ongoing struggle. Like I know in the CLCs I've worked in, I really try and nail the solicitors to agree to a scope of work, and then that's kind of the limit or whatever, or it's a new decision when you want to do a different bit of work, and it goes through the same rigorous process as opening any new case. Or hopefully, never, hopefully does. Have all these rules, don't always follow them. Okay, did anyone else want to say, so I think just picking up with what people said before, so obviously law reform is important, community legal education is an important function of how we do community law, working with other disciplines, whether it's counsellors, social workers, financial counsellors, other kinds of workers. It's kind of that wrapping around the client and being able to really, I would say, address their social needs so that their legal need actually falls away. Because for most of our clients, it's not always true, and some of us do specialist areas of law where our client's never going to escape the law, but it's kind of often by addressing the social issues, the legal issue is really just a result of the social conditions. And so actually sometimes, like a homeless client, you're helping them with fines, help with fines. Really, you just need to make them not homeless and not itinerant, and they won't get fines anymore, It's kind of a black and white example, but I think it illustrates the point. So look, I'm going to wrap up around my talk and then maybe give you 5 minutes to kind of nail me to the wall about class, if that's what you want to do. So look, really, I want to come back to what I said at the beginning. Really what I just want you to do, or what I want you to take away from this session, is that you question yourself and you question your organisation about how you do the work you do and what parts of the work you do are the most important parts. Because we're about to go through the ringer, and we don't know how long that will last, how long we'll be in the drought times for. And so it becomes way more important that we revisit our purpose and revisit what we're here for, because we're all going to have to make hard decisions, in the next period of time. And wait for the rain to come. All right. Any? Yep.
I think the clients are really important in terms of the community legal centre. So when you ask that question about this, the important person or role in a community legal centre, particularly if the clients then get quite activated by having a good resolution to their legal situation, and they become a community activist, and they speak for themselves in the community as opposed to the lawyer using them as a case study to change the law and things like that. I think that's where the real growth can happen with the clients.
Yeah.
Activating the clients in the community.
Okay. So that's I think a really great answer, is that the client is the most important part of a community legal centre. Well, that's good. But that's we need to think. Don't answer the question you're asked. That's the learning. Don't answer the question you're asked.
GMAR's example, where a client has gone and become part of GMAR and a strong activist in terms of stolen generation and grounded against renewables. So
Okay.
It's a combination of both.
Great. Look, how about rather than you ask me, I know that there's been grumbling over the last 2 days about class, so I'll just let you know, NACLAC has learnt a lot from the first wave of migration, and it wasn't without its problems, mostly technical problems, but 17 CLCs are now using class. So that's really something cause to celebrate. I know that you might not celebrate it, but I'm celebrating it. And the plan is we've taken on board all the feedback we've heard to date. So if you've got feedback about how you've been stuffed around, your time's been wasted, the comms aren't good enough, all of that kind of stuff, please give that feedback, because I'm committed to making it as good as we can make it. I do want you to understand that that NACLAC also is in kind of limited resources. We're human beings, we're not perfect. We're dealing with IT stuff which is mystical and, impenetrable, but we are committed to making class as good as we can for you. We welcome your feedback. We hope that your experience, at least of us, is a positive one, if even your experience of the database isn't always the best. But that said, what I've heard, and I'm happy to be told otherwise, that most of the people that have moved to class are quite happy, and that it's been a positive experience.
So the things that I'm not sure about is in this discussion with you, but one of the issues that we're talking about is the fact that if the migration, for whatever reason, doesn't work, or there's ongoing issues that we are not yet aware of, that the access to CELCIS ceases at the end of March. Is that right? At this stage, that's the case. Is there any talk about extending that?
We will know after the next wave of migration. Okay, so basically next week,
yep,
there'll be clearer comms. So because so I'm just going to speak. I'm not a diplomatic person. You probably noticed, right? So, but basically the first wave was the trial run, and we experienced every problem that you could possibly experience, and we learnt a lot from that. So this week we cancelled half the centres that we're going to migrate to, hopefully that the next group will be much, much smoother, but it's like a second test run. Should this wave of migration go smoothly as we hope, we think we've ironed out all the kinks, but we just want to make sure that we have, then we'll know how long the rest of the migration will take, and then how long we need to negotiate around keeping CELCIS running for. Is that a helpful answer?
Yeah. So you were working on the assumption that when things are working smoothly, that there's not going to be any any hidden problems, because I think that's the
Yeah,
challenge.
look, we think that we've now resolved all the problems, but the issue is that each centre's use of Celsius is different. So actually, even though everybody uses Celsius, it's not all the same. But we think we've now dealt with enough diversity that we're aware of all the issues. But I can't promise that we have encountered every issue. That's why when the next wave of, it's about 31 centres go through, we'll have a sense of, like with no issues, how fast they are processed. And then if that all goes smoothly, we can hit the accelerator on the rest. If it doesn't go smoothly, we need to come up with a plan.
I think the concern is that even if it does work, some of us have enormous databases, and so we could find, weeks down the track, there's data missing that has to come across.
Yeah. So look,
to what extent are we going to be able to recover that?
Okay. So look, so Celsius will be Celsius. This is my understanding as a non-technical person. My understanding is that Celsius will be archived, so the data in Celsius will always be accessible. What you won't be able to do is add. Okay? So you're not going to lose the Celsius data. And yes, you might discover in 3 months' time something went a bit buggy with your transfer, and let's say, I'll make it up, ethnicity didn't come across. What I'm told is that's a relatively easy fix. Okay, so you can shoot me in 3 months' time when it's not an easy fix. But that's what I'm onto that, and I'm told it's not a serious impediment. But what we know is that all the core, at least the conflict checking data or that essential data is coming across.
We had other parties missing.
Yeah.
Right,
So
it's probably more important to us even than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my understanding is all those those essential bugs have been ironed out. So thank you for suffering for the rest of us. I don't know what else to say, but someone had to be in the first wave. Okay. All right. Well, look. Thanks everyone for your time. I did want to say, just because Ali's on next, I'm by no means poo-pooing the risk management guide or our ethical obligations or any of that. I actually do think it's really important, but I think it's important that we engage with it in a critical and nuanced way. Okay. So I'll leave it at that.